The chair recognizes the senator from the 5th Middlesex District, Senator Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm thrilled to rise today in support of an act modernizing the foundation budget for the 21st century. I've worked for many years just hoping that, that this day would arrive here in the State Senate, and it is upon us. And I'm particularly pleased that we will be taking up and hopefully passing this legislation, that we are joined today by a number of students and teachers. The wonderful group from Brockton was introduced earlier by my colleague from Brockton, and it's my pleasure now to introduce and welcome students and teachers from Malden High School who are here today for Generation Citizen and stayed after the program was completed just to be present for the debate today. So please join me in welcoming them. The legislation that we are debating today is actually the issue that first motivated me to go into public service and run for the legislature. Back in 2004, my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's now in college, was in kindergarten. And one day, we got a letter sent home that informed my wife and I that the school library at her elementary school was going to be closed. And this was due to very steep budget cuts in the wake of the recession that followed the technology bubble bursting. And the school, her school, and many other schools, I suspect, at that time, were going to have to lay off librarians, teachers, and other staff and make all kinds of painful cuts that would hurt our students. And so in that letter, they asked if parents would be willing to volunteer to keep the school library open. So basically, that was the last resort, basically pleading with parents, can you please spare an hour here or there out of your busy schedule to come and keep the library open for our students? And this was a real eye-opener for me. I hadn't, prior to that time, I didn't have children in the public school system. I hadn't really focused on a lot of these issues, and it opened my eyes. I then, from there, got involved in local government and serving on the finance committee and learning about how we fund public education in Massachusetts. And that really was what eventually led me to run for the state legislature and to where we are today. Before I go any further, I want to express my very deep gratitude to the senator from Boston, Senator Chang Diaz. She's still with us. Her tremendous leadership on this particular issue and on so many education policy issues is really something I'm deeply appreciative of. I also want to thank the senator from Somerville, Senator Jalen, for her great work on education policy and her service on the Foundation Budget Review Commission. And I want to thank the chair of the Ways and Means Committee as well. And I suspect she would also say that the issue of our Chapter 70 formula was one of the main things that motivated her to run for the state legislature years ago. So we share that in common. Public education, to me, is the signature, is the hallmark of the state of Massachusetts. You go all the way back to Horace Mann in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s. Horace Mann recognized that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is not blessed with gold or silver or oil or natural gas or all kinds of other natural resources. What we are blessed with is human capital. It's the mind, it's our intellect. And that is what we've tapped into in the 100, 200 years since then, because we recognized that to be successful to build our economy, to improve our quality of life, that what we would need to do is invest in our children, invest in education, that it would be intellectual capital that would allow us to thrive and be successful. And in fact, Massachusetts was the first state in the nation to make sure that every single child, regardless of his or her family's income or background or ethnicity, would be able to attend a free public school and receive a public education. And as Senator Chang Diaz pointed out, it's written into our state's constitution, the oldest written constitution still in use anywhere in the world today. It's written in there that we will cherish education. That's how deep this goes in our bones. From the passage of the landmark Education Reform Act in 1993, which really established the structure of the Chapter 70 school funding formula and the foundation budget, from that time until about 2000, the foundation budget did its job. It actually reflected pretty closely the changes in our schools and the needs of our schools and the resources that they needed to have to provide a great education to our kids. Unfortunately, in the years since 2000, the foundation budget has not kept pace. The foundation budget has risen a little over 3% a year, according to the Chapter 70 formula, while actual net school spending has grown at more than 4% a year. And so, as a result, the average school district across the Commonwealth now is forced to spend about 120% of the foundation budget. So think about what that means. That means the foundation budget is supposed to be the amount that each school district needs based on its enrollment, based on its special education, number of students that require special education, the number of students that are English language learners. That foundation budget is supposed to reflect what that school district needs to provide a high-quality education to all those students. And yet, the average district is now spending 120% of that foundation. And remember, what that average masks is the fact that some districts, very often our most disadvantaged districts, cannot afford to spend more than the foundation budget. They just don't have the resources to do it. So they're spending right at the foundation budget. Other districts that are very fortunate, maybe wealthier communities that can afford to pass overrides and put more resources into their schools, are spending at 140%, 160%, even close to 200% of the foundation budget. So that, more clearly than anything else, tells you that the foundation budget today is inadequate. It does not reflect the actual needs of our schools. And the fact that the foundation budget, as calculated by our school funding formula, does not reflect what our districts need is putting tremendous financial pressure on all of our schools. And every one of us knows this, because every one of us hears from our students, from our teachers, from our parents, from our school committees, from our mayors and select boards, that they just can't do it. Every year they're struggling to try to balance the budget. Every year the school committee comes in with a budget that's right here just to maintain level services, maybe make a modest investment in foreign languages or in art or music or other areas. And every year they're told by the city council or the select board, the finance committee, nope, we can't do that. We can't get there. You're going to have to cut. And that's what's happening year in and year out, having to cut back sometimes below level services, and certainly not allowing our schools to make the very important investments that they need to make to prepare our students for the modern economy. So this is exactly the opposite of what we intended with the Education Reform Act of 1993, because that gap between our districts that have more means and those that are disadvantaged, that gap has been growing. That's exactly what we set out in 1993 to close, that gap. And we were pretty successful from 1993 to 2000. But since then, that gap has been widening. And that, to me, is a moral failure of the Commonwealth, and one that is, it is way past time that we address. When I served as a state representative prior to being sworn into this chamber, I was proud to sponsor the legislation that created the Foundation Budget Review Commission, and that was in the fiscal year 15 budget. This bipartisan commission spent a year traveling across the state, holding public hearings, talking to all of the stakeholders who know what is going on in our schools every single day. And their report, which was published in October of 2015, I think provided an excellent blueprint for the changes that need to be made to update the foundation budget. And once again, I want to thank the Senator from Boston, Senator Chang Diaz, as well as Representative Alice Paish for their fantastic Foundation Budget Review Commission. So I believe that the legislation before us today faithfully seeks to implement the recommendations, the blueprint that the Foundation Budget Review Commission, a bipartisan commission, I might add, put before us a few years ago. It establishes, I think, a very sensible process to phase in the Foundation Budget Review Commission recommendations with full public transparency and accountability, so everybody knows what the goal is, where we need to get to fully fund our public schools in the Commonwealth, and the progress that we're making each year to achieve that goal. Massachusetts, I talked earlier about Horace Mann and that we were a pioneer in establishing free public schools for every student back in the 1800s. Well, when we established the concept of a foundation budget in 1993 in the Education Reform Act, we were a pioneer once again. We were the first state to set up a system for ensuring that every school district should get the resources that it needs. And if the local community does not have the means to fully fund their schools, then it's the obligation of the state to make up the difference so that every child, no matter his or her zip code, would have access to the same high-quality education as every other child. We were a pioneer among all the states in establishing that. But as I have discussed and as you heard so eloquently from Senator Chang Diaz, we have fallen short in recent years, and we continue to fall short. So I hope with the passage of this legislation, we will once again lead the nation in ensuring that our school finance system provides adequate resources to enable every school in the Commonwealth and every single student in the Commonwealth to thrive and to be successful. Thank you very much, Mr. President.